All right, 12 o'clock straight up. Good afternoon, everyone. Bueno. This is Middays with Q. I'm your host, Rich Quinones. My guy, as always, Angel Martinez behind the glass, the madman that keeps us on the air for 60 minutes as we are coming at you live. Not bad bumper music. I'm going to give the playlist. We're going to get this situated because Angel already knows where I'm going with the playlist. He's got it covered from top to bottom. But listen, absolutely thrilled to be part of what Angel is doing and the whole gang at Riptide Media Network. And of course, 1029 The Game, Broad Street South. As I mentioned, myself, Rich Quinones, Angel Martinez will take you up to 1 o'clock. He'll keep us locked and loaded on the air. If you guys want to chime in on this late Wednesday, it's amazing that we're already creeping into June, right? And as always, get a hold of us, 727-858-6650. You start talking about the dog days of summer, and we touched a little bit on it on Martinez and Company. NHL, Western Conference, Eastern Conference Finals, really intriguing matchups. The NBA playoffs. We know that the Boston Celtics are going to wait the winner of the Dallas Mavericks and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Boston really had no resistance put up against them, against the Indiana Pacers. Tomorrow we'll talk with our hoops head expert, Jonathan Marshall. But I'm enjoying these NBA playoffs. I'm enjoying these NHL playoffs. I mean, obviously, the Knicks, my Knicks, got bounced in 7 against Indiana, which I thought just basically rolled over against the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics, I said this prior to the season. And as I mentioned, little NBA today. I want to get into some baseball as well. Get your thoughts on the news that came down yesterday. And then Lloyd Vance at 12:20 talk some NFL. We'll go around the league with him. But the Boston Celtics, I believe going into the season, it was pretty much tailor-made for them coming out of the Eastern Conference. I mean, this is a team that from top to bottom is stacked. We know about Tatum. We know about Brown. We're talking about White, even though no Porzingis. And I just thought the pressure was going to be on them to not only get through the Eastern Conference, but to get back to the NBA Finals. And right now, as it stands, I mean, think about this. Minus 230 for them to win it all. And then you got to throw in Tatum. You got to throw in Brown as potential Finals MVP. Now, if Boston were to win, I would make the assumption that it's probably going to be Tatum at minus 135. But the Eastern Conference not as top heavy as the Western Conference. And I know Angel mentioned this previously on his show with Minnesota and the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, it was set up for Dallas last night. I mean, all you have to do is knock down some of your free throws, play a little better perimeter defense. You can't allow Towns, you can't allow Edwards to penetrate, to put the ball on the floor. I mean, hell, Karl-Anthony Towns last night had a monster night. I think it was 4 or 5 from beyond the arc. It was set up for Dallas to get the sweep. Now, because you've got another game coming up, Dallas still leads Minnesota 3-1. You've got game 5 on the horizon tomorrow night, Thursday night. But Boston, again, sits and they wait. I mean, we already know when the finals were going to start, but Boston is just resting up. And I thought if you took a flyer on Dallas prior to the season, it would have been I guess you can say, an outside the box choice. But I want to give us some flowers, right? Because Kyrie Irving, whether you agree with, his comments, his stances, I ripped him when we, went through that situation with the anti-Semitic comments and remarks. And everyone was talking about COVID and that's, the getting the shot and that's his choice. Can we talk about Kyrie when he's engaged on the floor? He's a phenomenal player. And then you throw Doncic, you throw Luka into the mix. Now, last night they combined for 7 bad turnovers and they trailed going into the fourth quarter. But you have to just give him some credit because he has been able to take everything that's transpired over the last several years and just kind of micromanage that and then put it onto his game on the floor. And Dallas, if they were to beat Minnesota, which I believe they're going to close them out tomorrow night, because again, you don't want the series to stretch. You just don't. Dallas is going to have a puncher shot against the Boston Celtics. But the Boston Celtics, for all the moves that they made, for all the money that they're paying, their top 2 tandem, if you will, not to mention Porzingis, who got hurt, but you throw in a kid in White, a great role player that can put up 25, 30. I don't even look at him as a role player. I mean, he's a bona fide scorer in the NBA. It's going to be tough sledding for the Dallas Mavericks. But if they were to get to the NBA Finals against the Boston Celtics, I can see them throwing the Celtics stretch and take them to at least 6 games. The pressure's on Boston for you Boston Celtics fans. It's on the Boston Celtics. The pressure last night in the NHL was on my New York Rangers. And I'll say this for the Florida audience, obviously, with Angel and the gang being down there in Florida, Riptide, the Florida base. The Florida Panthers are a really good hockey team. I mean, I knew they were good, but I'm watching them throughout the playoffs, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, they're going to be in a collision class with the New York Rangers. And the Rangers, I don't know if they're running out of steam. I don't know if they're running out of gas, but once we saw that turnover in overtime last night and the Panthers had the power play going their way, I just knew it was going to be lights out. It's 2-2. It's a hell of a series. You got the Stars, you got the Oilers. Dallas is up 2-1 in that Western Conference Final. So, as I mentioned, you got a lot of good stuff going on in the world of sports. Now, the one story that came out yesterday in baseball that obviously and rightfully so has been getting a substantial amount of play, and rightfully so. And this was something, people are kind of taken back by this, but this is something that was talked about a couple years ago, if you guys remember. So Major League Baseball right now is adding in, they're incorporating Negro League statistics, which for the, let's just say the baseball purist or the old fan, and I'm a baseball purist, but I have no issue with this whatsoever. So now what is going to happen is this is going to shake up, obviously, the record books. So I don't know, people are like taken by surprise here. I mean, think about this. The line of demarcation was set because no blacks were allowed to play. So hence you have the Negro Leagues. So now Josh Gibson will become MLB's career leader with a 372 batting average. He surpasses Ty Cobb at 367. You've got 2,300 plus players that are given their just due. So this was a 3-year research project. And I can tell you this, I have absolutely no problem with this whatsoever. I mean, you have to think about it like this. It's a sign and a show of respect. And obviously, these players could not play Major League Baseball due to circumstances that were obviously beyond their control. And once these circumstances changed, then again, this is where MLB needed to step in. I have absolutely no issue with this. And I know there is a lot of pushback to this. I pulled up a couple numbers, right? And if you think about this, Jackie Robinson won the MVP, the NL MVP in 1949. 9 out of the next 11 MVPs in MLB were African-American. They were black players. So when you have Babe Ruth, when you have the Splendid Splinter, Ted Williams, when you have Joe DiMaggio saying about the importance of these players, it speaks volumes. And as far as baseball, which is a friggin' ridiculously long season, you've got some teams right now that are historically putting up some gaudy numbers. One of them happens to be in my backyard in the Philadelphia Phillies. Now I know they kind of hit the skids a little bit, but they're playing probably one of their best starts in franchise history. The Braves lose Acuna. Braves fans, don't panic. You still won the World Series a couple years ago when he got hurt. The Mets are struggling. You got the Yankees in the NL East. You got Cleveland looking really good in the Central. So we'll get into a little more baseball with Steve Gardner. But as I alluded to, I think, the NFL always takes center stage. In about 10 minutes, Lloyd Vance is going to join us. You guys want to chime in, you can connect with us on X at RichQ on Q. You can comment as well. 727-858-6650, Middays with Q, right here on Riptide Media Network. And of course, 1029 The Game, Broad Street South. The NFL. The NFL, to me, I think there's so many storylines going in to this season. And Angel touched a little bit on what's going on with the AFC and the Kansas City Chiefs. You've got Aaron Rodgers, who, again, we all have our thoughts on Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, fully healthy and engaged in the AFC East, which that division to me has taken a radical shape because there's still question marks with Tua, the Dolphins. Sorry, Fish fans down there in Florida. Don't kick me out when I come down there. Tua and the Dolphins. You look at what's going on with the Jets and Rodgers. Buffalo has a boatload of issues Josh Allen, no Diggs, and then you got the Pats, as Angel alluded to, with May. So I think there's going to be a changing of the guard a little bit in the AFC. You got some younger teams starting to kind of come up that we weren't talking about over the last several years. The Texans being one of them. Are the Colts going to get some production from the young quarterback in Richardson? Then you look over at the NFC, and I think the three head coaches that are really on the proverbial hot seat in the NFC, I think they all reside in the NFC East. Brian Daboll with the Giants, Nick Sirianni with the Philadelphia Eagles, and Mike McCarthy with the Dallas Cowboys. We'll get into that a lot more with Lloyd Vance. We'll get set to take a quickie timeout in a moment. But I think the NFL, when you look at these coaching staffs, and I think that's something that I'm going to touch with Lloyd, some of them, they were not constructed. They were not put together. They were put together poorly. I think some of these teams are going to suffer. If you look at some of these early odds right now, we know teams like Cincinnati, teams like the Detroit Lions, teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, teams like the Buffalo Bills, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Dallas Cowboys, they're going to be the favorites to potentially win their divisions, to make a deep run into the playoffs. But Kansas City, it takes so much to get back to the playoffs. It takes so much to get back to a Super Bowl. It takes so much to be in position to win it again. And they're getting ready to join that rarefied air if they can go back to back to back. So got a lot of NFL. Want to get into a little more of the NBA. Your thoughts on MLB now basically taking over. And I guess you can say, I guess the right terminology we're looking at is that they're going to integrate these Negro League stats, and it's going to be put into the MLB database, and that begins today. And it will kind of move the needle when it comes to stats, when it comes to records. But again, I'm telling you right now, you go back, I mean, hell, you look at Josh Gibson in his career. I mean, he passed away when he's 34, 35. You can't tell the story of baseball without the Negro Leagues. And I want to get your thoughts on that. You guys can tweet at me on X as well, at RichQ on Q. All right, just cranking up on a Wednesday edition of Middays with Q, 15 past the 12 o'clock hour on the East Coast. And we are coming at you live inside the Riptide Media Network studios, of course, port of Broad Street South and 102.9 The Game. On the other side, Lloyd Vance is going to join me right around 12:20. We'll go around the NFL with him. I'll ask him which coaches he believes are going to be under the microscope, which quarterbacks have the most pressure. And we know that every single season, we've got 2 or 3 quarterbacks that we start to look at their contracts. We start to look at they're going to be free agents, how it panned out last season, who's going to be under that microscope, who's going to be under pressure as well. So 15 past 12 o'clock hour, 45 to play with. We'll take you up to 1 o'clock straight up. Keep it locked in right here on a Wednesday edition of Middays with Q. So that was my cue for our timeout. So I'll get, you can see Angel and I are on the same page. We are in full effect as we're starting things out on this Wednesday. So we'll actually keep it here for a moment. I'll wait for Angel to come back in the saddle. So let me give you a couple of my thoughts right now. I pulled this up. We'll get to it in a second. He's doing yeoman-like work. This is what he does. He brings the lunch pail. He clocks in. He clocks out. He's up at, I think Angel literally, I don't think he sleeps, to be quite honest with you. My guess, what I'm trying to surmise is he's got those vampire tendencies. So like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, he might literally take like a 15-minute cat nap. And then he does what we like to do. We grab our coffee and we're good to go. So we'll keep it locked in. As I mentioned, Lloyd Vance in a couple minutes. I want to get to some comments on Facebook, and a couple of you guys already tweeting at me as well. Joe D, old school baseball fan, chimes in. Q, love to hear you on a new network. Congratulations. Always looking forward to your baseball insight. Got to disagree with you wholeheartedly. MLB stats should be kept to MLB. Again, I can't really, and Joe, I always appreciate it, pal. I can't go that route just yet. I can't, because I always believed, let's take the NFL, for instance. When we talk about the Hall of Fame, and you guys are sitting at a party or you're out at the bar, you're watching the games with your buddies, you're having a couple pops, you guys will routinely turn around to one another and say, hey, man, do you think so-and-so is a Hall of Fame player? The Hall of Fame, if you have to ask if the player is a Hall of Fame player, chances are he's not. Now, I bring that up to say this. When we start talking about telling the story of said sports, like, can you tell the story of the NFL without insert quarterback X, Y, and Z? And if you say you can't, then that's all the more reason that the player will be, is, or should be in the Hall of Fame. Point being, to Joe's tweet, and I appreciate it, but I just disagree with it. When it comes to baseball, can you really tell the story of Major League Baseball, Cooperstown, without the Josh Gibsons of the world or the Satchel Pages? I mean, can you talk about that without incorporating the Negro Leagues and what these African-American players had to endure and deal with? Can you talk about when Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, right? Can you talk about one of the great Latin players of all times in Roberto Clemente? Like, if you can't have those conversations, if you can't bring those names up, then you don't know the history, or you just want to be ignorant of the history. But point being, if you don't bring them up, right, then you're doing a disservice to them. That's the way I look at it. And I think you can't tell the story of baseball. I mean, look, I've said this on the record. I do not acknowledge Barry Bonds as the home run king. Home run king to me is Hank Aaron. I do not acknowledge Bonds as the home run king. I've had arguments with people. I've actually swayed a little bit on my stance on Pete Rose. Years ago, I was very staunch defender of MLB. Pete Rose, when he was on Dateline and he was pressed about gambling, he said he never gambled, he never bet. Then I started to realize, okay, 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, you get a little more wiser, you get a little more mature, you understand that. Don't be so naive. We know a lot of players, we know a lot of people that gamble on sports. What Pete Rose did was wrong. I get it. It's the cardinal sin. It's the one rule. Don't bet on games. Okay, fine. Be that as it may, I've loosened my stance because I think, in speaking with a lot of the old school MLB Hall of Fame voters, they just want to keep sticking it to Pete Rose. Pete Rose will most likely get in the Hall of Fame. He'll get into Cooperstown when he leaves this earth. That's just the way I look at it. So I think I've changed my stance on Pete Rose, where can you tell the story of baseball? Can you tell the story of MLB without Pete Rose? And if the answer is no, then what does that tell you? Right? What does that tell you? So, all right, we'll keep it locked in 12:20. Pete Rose eventually will get into the Hall of Fame. He will get into Cooperstown, and most likely it'll be when he's no longer here. I mean, that's just the way we look at it. We're going to see if we can line up Lloyd Vance. We might keep it here instead of taking a quick commercial break. Not a biggie. 20 past 12 o'clock hour, Wednesday edition, Middays with Q. Rich Quinones here. We are in late May, the 29th, 2024, as we hit Memorial Day weekend, which means the official start of summer. I can tell you, you walk outside from where I am, the Short Points, and it was absolutely just ridiculous over the weekend, 3-day weekend. You can't even sit there and talk about the shoebies. I can't even complain about it anymore. But I saw the crap that was going on in Margate, the crap that was going on in Ocean City and Wildwood. I got a couple thoughts about that as well. All right, 21 past 12 o'clock hour. Quick timeout. We'll come back. Keep it locked in. Riptide Media Network. It's a Wednesday edition of Middays with Q.
To some people, the sound of a baby babbling doesn't mean much. But that's not necessarily true. By 6 months, they're combining vowels and consonants. By 9 months, they're trying out different kinds of sounds. And by 12 months, their babbling is beginning to take on some meaning. Especially if there's no babbling at all. Little to no babbling by 12 months or later is just one of the possible signs of autism in children. Early screening and intervention can make a lifetime of difference and unlock a world of possibilities. Take the first step at autismspeaks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
The following is made possible by Dad.
Why was the basketball court all wet? Because the players kept dribbling all over it.
The dad joke. Corny, grown-worthy, but also one of the simplest ways to share a moment with your kids.
Why do you have to be careful when it's raining cats and dogs? Because you might step in a poodle.
And kids that spend more time with their dads grow up to be smarter, more successful.
Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding.
And, with any luck, funnier adults.
Why didn't the skeleton go to the dance? Because he didn't have any body to go with.
Dad jokes rule. So take a moment to make a moment and give your kid a laugh. It's as easy as going to fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
That's really funny.
Okay, men, this is your time. Maybe you didn't choose this, but you're here now. You're gonna go out there and be an all-star caregiver. It's up to you. So what are you gonna do? You're gonna go grocery shopping, cook, clean, be there emotionally and physically. You gotta dig deeper. Drive them to physical therapy, doctor's appointments. Don't you forget about the pharmacy. I know you won't, because that's what caregivers do. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. This is your time to show the world, your family, and yourself that you're tougher than tough. Now go out there and be the best caregiver this world has ever seen. Caregiving is tougher than tough. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick and proud aunt. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing. But not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. 1 in 6. That little girl sitting alone at the playground, she can't play like the other kids. She doesn't have the energy because she's hungry. School lunch will be her only meal today. It breaks my heart that this is the reality in our country, but it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste. This food is then provided to families and children in need. Being a kid should be about using your imagination, learning, and having fun. These children shouldn't have to miss out on simply being a kid because they're hungry. To find out how you can help end childhood hunger in your community, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
All right, we are back, I believe, as we like to say in the business, working out a couple kinks, but always appreciate Angel doing a great job, as always, on the side. All right, so 12:25, we are going to see if we can track down Lloyd Vance as well, and he should be joining us any moment. And then we'll get to your tweets as well on a Wednesday edition Middays with Q. Rich Quinones here. So hopefully we'll get to Lloyd. We'll talk a little NFL. And I want to get his thoughts. As I mentioned, some of these quarterbacks that are really on the hot seat. And I think some of these head coaches are on the hot seat as well. So we'll get into that. A little more focus on the NFC East, kind of our backyard, just to get his thoughts on a couple things. And we mentioned also, too, NFL doesn't sleep, some news and notes. Texans making a couple moves, which I think they're going to be one of those teams on the rise. But I always find it fascinating when so Lloyd and I have been breaking down on a couple of the other shows like BYP, My Back Your Play, which is a predominantly gambling show. And when we talk about that, we break down the divisions, we do the lost records to schedule release. We talk a little bit about, where we think some of these teams are going to wind up. It's tough to kind of quantify, but point being, you start to look at these early games, some of these early schedules, and you can start to look at some of these futures odds and some of these lines as well. And it kind of tells you where the books and where the sharps and where the gambling public really, the perception where they view some of these NFL teams. And I think there are a couple teams that we might think are going to be predominantly bad that are perhaps going to surprise some people. But I've got my teams that I believe are going to struggle. And I also have my teams that I believe are going to surprise some people. And we'll get into that. We'll see if we can punch up Lloyd in a moment. I believe he is with us, but we'll see if we can punch this up in a second. And as I said, working out a couple kinks. Angel doing phenomenal work as he always does. So we appreciate that. You guys hang tight, be patient. If I look right now, AFC, I think everyone is waiting for Aaron Rodgers coming back 100%. Here we go. There's going to be no issues. Hackett and Salah and Aaron Rodgers, and they've got a great defense, great offense. So,
Yeah, I can hear you.
There he is. Late to the party. My goodness. We say 12:20, late to the party. There he is.
All right. Angel, tell him I've been sitting on here for 5 minutes.
Do not, Angel, pop up here. Angel, pop up in here. Angel. Do not pin it. This is utterly ridiculous. Do not pin it on Angel Martinez. This is not pilot era.
I never pinned it on him. I was ready.
Hey, we're working at the kinks
Angel,
here.
I've been dealing with this guy, 15, I don't even know, or more years.
Yeah.
It's always the same. Lloyd's always late. He's never on time. Yeah. We used to do remotes at a bowling alley, and I was on time, man. I was there, baby.
Hold on. You were on time because you know what? You weren't getting paid talent fee. It was just eat and drink, and we were happy at the time, my friend.
No, he was. Lloyd was there. I was trying to communicate with you and Lloyd, and I was refreshing stuff and everything else. So everything was just frozen in time. So Lloyd was on time. I'll give it to him. He was on time.
That's right. Tell him, Angel.
Hey, man. Listen, Lloyd's my guy. I love him. And that, of course, Lloyd Vance, our NFL insider, also host Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, part of Broad Street South, Angel Martinez's network. Lloyd, appreciate you jumping on board. I mean, we used to do the middays with Q with the radio. Now we got it streaming, the video, the audio, the whole component, Riptide Media Network. But always good to, I feel like we just spoke. Oh, wait, we just did. And right away, here we go. Joey B wants to know the hat. Here we go. Is it?
Hey, the Phillies are playing so well. So I want the baseball cap.
Yeah, you know what? I mentioned that too. I mean, they're at a historic pace, the Philadelphia Phillies. By the way, let me ask you this. You mentioned the Philadelphia Phillies. So for years, you've covered HBCU, right? Historically Black college universities. You've got a vote as well, Hall of Fame. Did you see the story that came down with MLB? They're going to incorporate the Negro League statistics now, basically all under one umbrella. And I said, listen, I have no issue with this because, again, ultimately the reasons that they couldn't play were out of their control. But for someone that's covered for years, historically Black colleges and universities and football teams, when you hear something like this, got to be refreshing, no?
Yeah, Q, it's great. Those guys are going to get their recognition now. The big thing is, it was just so hard to compile a lot of statistics, unless the game was covered by like the Pittsburgh Courier or some of those old papers. But they did a really good job. I read up on that. They did a panel and then, 17 guys, and they found these stats and they're bringing them in. So it's good these guys are going to get their just due, belatedly, obviously. Most of them have passed away, but it's very good that they're going to get their recognition. Josh Gibson, Cool Papa Bell, all those guys from that era.
Yeah, and when you think about it too, what's interesting is you look at, you have Cooperstown, obviously, then we have Canton, but then we look at the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. Everyone thinks right away it's NBA. It's not. They're throwing in your ABA. They're throwing in your college. They're throwing if you were overseas. They're throwing if you're Olympian. So I just find that interesting because when we start to talk like the NFL and kind of bring it full circle for a moment, if you have to ask if the guy's a Hall of Famer, chances are he's not a Hall of Famer, right?
Yeah, we have a barometer, and you're always going to compare players and eras to each other, but there's certain numbers that have to be hit. I know baseball is just so focused on numbers and averages and all that, but in the NFL, as you said, typically Most of these guys, they'll pass the smell test or not in terms of being a Hall
Yeah.
of Famer. Obviously, there's a lot of back and forth. I talk to the guys that are in the room when they're voting.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of these. Look, we know right now in the NFL with some of these current crop of quarterbacks, I mean, it's pretty clearly defined. Aaron Rodgers, roller skates, walk in, even if he gets hurt again, 4 snaps into the season, right? Patrick Mahomes, Hall of Famer. Then you've got some of these quarterbacks where we believe they're kind of making that, that projection, right? If we were going to project maybe a Josh Allen. My goodness, I'm trying to think. Hurts is too young. Prescott, I got to get to the playoffs. Matthew Stafford, right, won a Super Bowl. Jared Goff putting up some numbers. Joe Burrow, right, young quarterback. I mean, the two that you really just think of right now off the top of your head currently is Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, those two, obviously, Aaron Rodgers already put together a resume that's going to say, okay, he is a Hall of Famer. He's won a Super Bowl, all those MVP awards. And Patrick Mahomes, I think a couple more years. Obviously, he's already run MVPs, 2 Super Bowls, etc. But there's a name I'm going to throw at you, and you're going to be like, oh, God, Lloyd. Russell Wilson has won a Super Bowl.
Totally overlooked.
And he won a lot of games. So
no, you're right.
He has to be in the conversation. I know the last couple of years he's struggled, and we're going to see how he does in Pittsburgh. But definitely, if you're talking quarterbacks, maybe he's the only other one I could think that would be in that conversation.
Yeah, it shows you how much I've been thinking about Russell Wilson, right? I mean, Russell Wilson now jettisoned from Denver now to Pittsburgh, trying to beat out, their quarterback and win that battle in that situation. But yeah, he's definitely going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. I mentioned some of these coaches, I think, going into the season. You and I on Back Your Play on BYP, we talk about the schedule. We talk about these coaching staff is assembled, the strengths and the weaknesses. I mean, I'll give you 3 that I think are coming right out of the NFC East. And you let me know where you stand with this. I mean, when we start to take their temperature, so to speak, Brian Daboll with the Giants, Nick Sirianni with the Philadelphia Eagles, and then you've got Mike McCarthy with the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, is that just kind of, too easily reading the room saying those 3 out of the NFC and really in that division are going to be under a microscope this season?
Yeah, Q, it's crazy. We're talking about already these coaches on hot seats, but this is what's coming up because these guys are lame ducks. They're in the last year of their contract. Mike McCarthy, Sirianni as well. And I'll throw 2 other names I think are on a hot seat. Robert Saleh with the Jets. He's got to get it done. He's got all that firepower that Aaron Rodgers wanted. And then you got to talk about Matt Eberflus with the Bears. I know the Bears kind of down the stretch, they picked it up a little bit, and they've all these great draft picks coming in, Roma Dunzier and Caleb Williams, but he's also on a hot seat. So as we know, Q, gear to your proposition in NFL, unless you're that established coach and you have a relationship with your owner. Some of these guys want results right away, and they're saying, look, get it done or you're out of here. So, it's crazy. Already their job's on the line. The season hasn't even gotten to training camp yet.
Yeah, I feel like, though, like Chicago, that situation, you probably get a little wiggle room, right? Because of Caleb Williams. You have that pass, so to speak. Maybe you have like a year or so. Listen, if you were to ask me, and Joey brings it up, Belichick to the Jets, Saleh gets fired. I've been saying this. I think it's set up where if the Giants struggle again, and I believe they're not going to win 4 to 5 games, I think they're going to be very hard pressed to be competitive this season. It's not even with the loss of Saquon Barkley. Brian Daboll's a good coach. I don't like the staff that's around him. And the Giants have been quick to pull the trigger. If you look with some of these coaches, I mean, after Coughlin, Shermer was a disaster. I'm sorry, McAdoo was a disaster. Shermer, they got blown out by 40 against the Rams at home, and that was pretty much it. And then you bring in Joe Judge, who was just a jackass. That didn't work out. I think the act with Daboll is kind of like the act in Philly with Sirianni. If you win, you deal with it and put up with it. If you don't, you're gone. But I can see I think when Harbaugh takes a job with the Chargers, that eliminates Harbaugh with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Jerry Jones wants to make a splash, does he not? So think about this. Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott, contracts are up. You got
Right.
Sanders' kid, and then you got Belichick out there. So if you want to kind of just fill in the blanks, I mean, ego, Jerry Jones, open up the checkbook. Here you go, hoodie. Let's draft Deion's kid. Or I see Belichick, if it blows up, and I mentioned on BYP and on Q with the Jets too, jokingly, just to kind of come full circle and stick it to the past. But we know his love affair with the Giants. And let me ask you a two-pronged question. Why do you feel Bill Belichick is not coaching this season? And do you think if the Giants were to move on to Dable, does Belichick make the most sense?
He's going to be out there. You got Belichick, you got Mike Vrabel. There are two veteran coaches that have won a lot of games. Obviously, Belichick's resume is a lot heavier, and yeah, he could make sense there. So, he's always loved that New York market. We know he took the Jets job for about a day or so, and then moved on from it. But yeah, Jets, Giants, if those jobs are available, they definitely going to look to Belichick. I did watch the Tom Brady roast, and he was front and center in that whole thing. You could see he still wants to be part of the mix. So, I think he's still keeping in touch with these owners, and he has that panache. These guys that want to make a splash. I know we talked about David Tepper and what he did down there in Carolina. He's quick to pull trigger and get rid of a coach and this and that. And some of these other owners are like that as well. So there are going to be opportunities for Belichick out there. And I could see, you talk about Jerry Jones. He wants to make a splash as well, too.
12:40 on the East Coast, Wednesday edition of Middays with Q, coming at you live on the Riptide Media Network. Rich Quinones here, Angel Martinez behind the glass producing the show. You can catch him. I was going to say Lloyd with the Disappearing Act. You can catch Angel with Martinez and Company. 10. This is why I love doing the video as opposed to the other element of the radio, right? So you can catch Angel. Let's say you can catch Pete Shepard Show 7 to 10, then Angel Martinez and Company 10 to 12. Of course, Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. The Disappearing Act for a moment, back in the saddle was on 102.9, the game at Lloyd Vance. Joey chimes in. Can you imagine the media circus if Deion Sanders went to Cowboys as a coach, son Shador as quarterback? Jerry Jones would be an artistic heaven. I mean, listen, I feel as though Deion Sanders is almost kind of pulling what LeBron is with his kid, right? I mean, ultimately, we only have said teams that we're interested in you playing for. I mean, look, we've seen it. Right? Elway spurned the Colts. Eli spurned the Chargers. It wouldn't be the first time. I don't know where you have this kid projecting when it comes to being a legit NFL starter. I think the kid's a hell of a talent, but it just almost makes, this is the ego, and this is why the Cowboys haven't won anything, because this is what ruins the Cowboys, right? It's that ego of Jerry Jones who just does it he does it because he wants to do it, right? I mean, this is the same guy that wanted to draft Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, lately his son, Stephen Jones, has really kind of increased his level in the organization and kind of saying, look, Dad, we got to calm down here a little bit a couple times. His dad's getting in his 80s, Jerry Jones, and he does want to win immediately. But you got to always remember, Q, he has that title of GM. He's the only guy, owner and GM. Until they bring in a real football guy to run the operation, it's going to be the soap opera that we're talking about. And everybody I've talked to in NFL ranks says, always remember with Deion, it's not college football. It's not basketball. A lot of owners would not put up with his act. You know what I mean? In terms of it, they like their head coach to act a certain way, so just getting a job is going to be interesting to see if Deion, but he's done a pretty good job with rebuilding Colorado, and I think he's going to be there for a little bit. But if he wins there, yes, maybe may change some of these owners' attitudes, some of the guys in the front offices that I've talked to. But it would be interesting to see if he's available. And his son, getting back to him, pretty light quarterback class coming up. Right now, you'd have to say yes, he's the number one guy in terms of the quarterbacks.
Do you automatically put Harbaugh right underneath Reed in the AFC West, even though Sean Payton has won a Super Bowl now with Denver?
That's a good question. Uh, yeah, I definitely have to put him there. You got Antonio Pierce who got the job with the Raiders. Interim coach did a good job down the stretch, got that job. And then you talk about Sean Payne. They're really in such a flux there with the Denver Broncos. They're talking about maybe starting a rookie quarterback. So I think that's going to be a tough season for them as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how well Harbaugh can turn around a team. They do have Justin Herbert there, but as we always talk about, Q, that team with the Chargers, they just cannot finish out games under Brandon Staley. They always lost overtime games and tight games under 8 points or so, and always found a way to lose. So that's what they're bringing in Harbaugh to do, bring some of that structure and some of that winning mentality that he's bringing from the University of Michigan.
Steve on X chimes in. Q, you've been killing Robert Saleh, Aaron Rodgers. You've been killing my Jets for the past 20 years. Lloyd's going along because he just doesn't want to disagree with you. He sounds like he's a closet Robert Saleh hater. Hold on a second. Two things. Be honest. I don't think Robert Saleh is a good head coach. You already know how I feel. I went on the record and said the Jets need to steer clear of. I said this 2 Marches ago, steer clear of Aaron Rodgers. Now, did I know he was going to go out and tear up his Achilles after 4 offensive snaps? No, but it made me look like a genius. I mean, it's unfortunate that it happened. But I don't think you're a Salah, or as you say, Salah hater. I just think you're not high on the head coach.
Yeah, I do. I nothing personal against these guys. I always say it. I'm an analyst. I look at the way the teams are built, and Salah has not done a great job. The team was 7-10. The Jets, as we know, all their suffering fans, though, have not been to the playoffs since 2013, the longest drought in the National Football League. And he's a guy, I just think he's a better defensive coordinator than being the CEO type of a team. That offense has been such a wreck. I know, as you just said, they thought Rodgers could fix everything, the great deodorant, covering everything up. But him getting hurt just showed the deficiencies on that squad, the way they were built, particularly their offensive line has just been a disaster, And even though Zach Wilson, we killed him, he was running for his life back there. And they've tried to fix that over and over again. They got rid of Kai Becton, and they've shuffled some things around. But we'll see how he does. He's bringing in the over the hill gang, quite frankly. He has Rodgers, he has Tyron Smith coming over from the Dallas Cowboys, and a couple of older guys on that team.
Now, in Lloyd's defense, which he's spoken about it many times on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football and Sports Radio 102.9 from the game. You guys can find it on Monday nights, except for the last 3 weeks, only because there's a lot of wedding stuff that's going on. But he has talked about him before with Kevin and without Kevin. Even him and I have talked about it on his show beforehand. So, and Lloyd's defense, no, he's not agreeing with Rich because he has brought it up before. So that's number one. The other thing, too, you guys have been talking about when it comes to Deion Sanders, Deion's name, and I think it's almost Deion himself, had brought up that if Florida came calling, that he may decide to come down to Florida as well. So I want to get you guys your thoughts on if he decides to jump ship.
Listen, what's going to happen is now with all this, and by the way, the Jets signed Tariq Cohen, pardon me. This whole transfer portal and the NILs, right? I think you had that one player come out and basically say, hey, man, this university is more about shine than substance, right? Pretty much calling out Deion Sanders and the team and the coaching staff. At this point, he's going to go wherever the money is. I mean, would he go to Florida? He was a Florida State. He was a Seminole. Does he stick it to them? Deion's not going to go to the pros. He's not going to be a head coach in the pros. He can stay as long as he wants at Colorado, or he can maybe stick it to Florida State and go to Florida. I think Deion does what Deion wants to do at the end of the day, what he thinks is the best move for him and his family. But also, the checkbook doesn't lie.
True. Yeah, I agree with you. Deion likes the money. He likes the fame. And wherever he's going to get somebody to shine a light on him and what he can do there, he's going to go there. So with that NIL money, as Rich was talking about, that's a huge factor. And a lot of these young guys today, they're just following the money, and they and he's a name brand. So, he's prime. So everybody wants to play for him in terms of college. A lot of these younger players want to go there. But as Q was saying, I still just don't think an NFL situation is best for him.
Yeah, you know what though? You're saying everyone wants to play for him. He's prime. I equate it to boxing, where all these young fighters want to get signed to Mayweather Promotions because they think the glamour and the glitz of being with Floyd Mayweather. But at the end of the day, they have, they're not going to get moved along unless they're like a ridiculous, sick prospect. If they're 135, 140, 147, and they're moving up and they're knocking guys out left and right, and they're fan friendly for television, and they know they can make them money, then yeah, it's a perfect marriage. But I think some of these players might also realize that, hey, man, this is a guy that before he even took the field as Colorado head coach looked at 100 something odd players and said, half of you guys aren't going to be here, which was
Yeah, and
ballsy.
and Q and the grass is not always greener on the other side. There was a lot of guys that went to Colorado and said, "Oh, that wasn't a good fit for me." I talked to guys, that were with him at Jackson State, and just the way he kind of goes about business rubs some people the wrong way, some players the wrong way, some parents the wrong way. You know what I mean? And it's not for everybody. So yeah, definitely Dion. He's going to be in it for. One guy told me, he's like, "Oh, Dion's in it for Dion. Always remember that." And that's somebody that knows him very well.
Yeah, no, 100%. 12:48, a couple more minutes to play with on a Wednesday edition of Middays with Q, coming at you live from the Riptide Media Network studios. Don't forget, of course, we are powered always by Sports Radio 102.9. Check out the app, part of Broad Street South. You can catch Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 102.9 The Game, and Angel Martinez behind the glass. Catch him Monday to Friday. Martinez and company 10 to 12, and it's a nice little, I guess you can say, lead in after Pete Shepard does a great job Monday to Friday with the Pete Shepard Show, 7 to 10. So as always, keep it locked in. You saw the Texans. They inked up Collins. I think it was 72 million. I don't have the years in front of me. 52 million guaranteed. Not a bad payday, if you will. About 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns, 25 years of age. So you add him, Dell, you add Diggs. So they're giving Stroud a bunch of weapons. It's amazing that right coaching staff, right roster. Here you go, Houston Texans, another weapon for that young quarterback.
Yeah, Q, we talked about competition for the Kansas City Chiefs, and that was divisionally. But I think the Texans are building a young team that can compete with them in terms of just firepower. And you talk about signing Collins, they bring on over Stephon Diggs, and then CJ Stroud just looks like, I'm not saying he's a young Mahomes, but he's looking like that next quarterback that can step up into that top 5 realm. So, this team has done a great job in terms of building themselves offensively, defensively. And I think in terms of their division, I think they're going to win the AFC South again. And this is a team that could make some noise.
Yeah, I think the AFC, I almost equate it to the Western Conference in the NBA. It's really top heavy. I mean, you've got 4 or 5 really good teams. I mean, Buffalo is still a very good team. Miami, I know people still want to criticize Tua. I like Tua. I think he's a good quarterback. I think the kid gets a bad rap. Then you've got Kansas City, Cincinnati, as long as Burrow's healthy. I mean, I look at Harbaugh, and I've had this conversation before on BYP. I mean, is he that great of a head coach to come in instantly and account for, say, 3 more wins for the Chargers? I don't know. If that's the case, they're going to compete with Kansas City in the AFC West. You've got some young teams. Still got Tomlin with Pittsburgh. I don't know if the Russell Wilson. I mean, look, listen. I've been told by players, the reason he wore out his welcome in Seattle. If a teammate was trying to get a hold of Russell Wilson, they had to go through his secretary. I mean, the guy wouldn't even give out his cell phone number. I mean, you knew last year when Sean Payne was talking about no players are going to have reserved parking spaces, that, the shit was going to hit the fan. Even prior to that, when they decided, let me take the ball out of his hands early on with Hackett, right?
Yeah, it's crazy, Q, because some people I talked to said he was even dressing away from the team. And I don't know if it was an interpersonal thing between him and Peyton and some of the younger guys that were on the team, but it's a situation where it did not work out for Russell Wilson there. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, I've talked to some people there in the past, they have a particular way of doing things, and he's going to have to be part of the team, part of Mike Tomlin's plan. And if he's not, it's just going to blow up. So, you kind of say, okay, maybe it was a personality conflict between him and Peyton, but something was amiss there with the Denver Broncos. And the Steelers are going to be an interesting team. Last year, 10-7, 3 games behind the Ravens. We'll see if they were able to close that gap. Obviously, they're going to be a run-heavy team with Arthur Smith coming over there running that offense. They're going to try to run it and then have some timely throws from Russell Wilson. Hopefully, he can protect the football, do a better job than Kenny Pickett did. It's real interesting, though. You keep talking about the Chargers. I think the Chargers are going to be a fun team to watch because obviously you have Justin Herbert there. But they only won 5 games last year. You wonder how much of that gap can they close between them and the Kansas City Chiefs after being a 5-win team. Harbaugh's got that long contract and is getting all the money, so he's in it for the long haul. You got to wonder, though, do they have enough offensive weapons? Obviously, Justin Herbert there. And they're bringing over a lot of ex-Ravens as well as their offensive coordinator from the past from the Ravens. So it's going to be fun to watch.
Joey's down there in Denver, so he gets a feel on the Broncos and the Colorado Buffaloes. Thank God Russell Wilson is gone. Can't name number 1 Sierra song. Actually, I don't have a problem with Sierra. I pull it up. So Denver 8-9 last year, started at 1-5, got to 6-5. They were giving up about 24 points. I'm sorry, they were scoring 24. They were giving up about 21. So they were right around 21, 24. Offense, again, very skittish. But I don't like the coaching staff that they assembled. I think they brought in a guy like Vance Joseph just for that experience of 19 years. But right now, as it sits, if you look at their odds, AFC West, I mean, listen, they're below the Chargers. And they're right there with the Raiders. Still think people are waiting for the other shoe to drop, maybe with the Raiders. Kansas City is going to be the team to beat. I mean, we can agree to that, right? And I know we'll talk a little more about this on BYP this week, and then next week on Middays with Q. Real quick before I let you get out of here, I guess if I were to ask you let's just say right now, the number one storyline, it's late May, the number one storyline to Lloyd Vance heading into the 2024 NFL season would be what?
I think what we talked about earlier, these coaches coming into the season already on a hot seat, McCarthy. You talk about Nick Sirianni. Can he turn this thing around? Yes, they've got the new coordinators coming in for the Philadelphia Eagles. Everybody blame the guys that they kicked out the door. But can some of these coaches turn these situations around? Obviously, I want to see can these young quarterbacks acclimate to their new surroundings and change their teams, particularly Caleb Williams. Everybody's talking about him as a Andrew Luck type prospect. I want to wait and see on that. But a lot of good storylines around the National Football League. And we always know somebody's going to jump from the bottom into the top position. So I'm looking at, maybe could we see the Chargers that we talked about? Could they step up and go a little further? Could the Jets have a rebound with Aaron Rodgers? He's going to be a number one story. I know you don't want to hear, but Aaron Rodgers is going to be a huge story. And then, what do you think about in terms of Hard Knocks? Is that a big story or not? Them going to the Giants?
No, I think the NFL is punishing me. I don't. What do I need to see? Daniel Jones is his goofy ass looking face talking about 140 million and coming back from an injury. No. Giants are going to be lucky to win 4 games. And I
think in the NFC East.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, how many? Well, all the canceling. Lloyd will never become a Swiftie. I will say that for him. I will close it out for him. I will close it out for him. I don't know. I'm going to have to ponder that one. All right. I'm up against it. Hey, I always appreciate you jumping on, and I always appreciate you being on time and not tarte, as we like to say, my friend. Everyone can catch you. Check out Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029 The Game. Follow him on Twitter at Lloyd Vance. We'll do it again next week, pal. Always appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
All right, Q. Thanks for having me on.
All right. There you have it. The big man, Lloyd Vance, with the hat. Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you what, I love Lloyd, man. That dude's been with me from the get-go, from the get-go, always brings it. We always go back and forth. We always have a good time. And he does a really good job too. He's had great coverage over the years for HBCU. Voter, did a lot of stuff with NFL Network, contributor as well. So adds a lot of insight to the show. Tomorrow, Jonathan Marshall, I will have him jump on. We'll talk a little NBA. Dallas looks to seal the deal against the Minnesota Timberwolves. That early line right now, Minnesota's laying a couple as it stands. Looks like I pulled it up, I think about 3.5 to 4. So we'll get into that. I'll also give you some of my thoughts on, I guess if you were playing it out perception wise, right? You're talking about, MVP for the final. So right now, as it sits, Timberwolves indeed 5.5. Joey, we appreciate that, pal. And yeah, the dog, the puppy, Kiki is doing very well. She finally started to go outside. I literally, I almost dropped to my knees. Tears were coming down my eyes. It was unbelievable. It was a moment. No more pee pads. I was like a proud papa. I was just sitting there and just, I just had a moment. It just hit me. I've got a dog. All right. Hey, don't forget, we'll be back in the saddle tomorrow from 12 to 1. We're still going to work out some of the kinks on my end. We're hoping Tuesdays and Thursdays going forward. I know Angel's got some big plans for the show, big plans for the network. But as a reminder, you can catch some great talent on Riptide Media. Don't forget Pete Shepard, Monday to Friday, 7 to 10. Angel Martinez, mi hermano, Martinez and Company, 10 to 12. I follow 12 to 1. Also, if you go on the BroadStreetSouth.com website right now, click on that friggin' app, 1029 The Game. Click on it, click on it, click on it, click on it, click on it. Download, support what these guys are doing on Broad Street South. What Angel's doing, our great guests like Lloyd, Jonathan Marshall, all our awesome guests that we're going to have on. Give these guys a follow on social media, IG, also on X and Facebook. Keep the comments coming. Our show will be posted on my YouTube channel as well, Rich Q on Q. So for Angel Martinez keeping us on the air behind the glass, always appreciate him. Our guest, Lloyd Vance. I'm Rich Quinones. Have a good Sports Wednesday. We will talk to you mañana. As always, hasta luego, buen día.